All right, well, we've got a fantastic conversation planned for today, so we will go ahead and get started, Sarah, so that we have plenty of time for your presentation and a good discussion too. Folks who are on the line who I may not have met before, my name's Jen Goldsack. I'm the CEO here at the Digital Medicine Society, or DIME, and we are delighted to welcome you to our October webinar. Sarah, before I go ahead and introduce you to folks on the line, I'm going to just do a little bit of housekeeping so that everyone can engage with the conversation today. So first of all, our session today is being recorded. The good news about that is that the recording will be available on the DIME webinar page after the session, should you like to share it with one of your colleagues. Also, we encourage you to interact with our expert, with Sarah, at the end of her presentation. There are a variety of different ways to do this. So please, as we are going along, feel free to use the chat box, type your question into the chat box, and I will pose those to Sarah during the discussion. Alternatively, if you'd like to wait till the end of the presentation, you can go ahead and raise your hand. Not like this. There's a ribbon at the bottom of your Zoom with reactions, and you can click on the button to raise your hand there. We'll unmute you so you can ask your question live to Sarah. So first of all, Sarah, absolutely delighted to welcome you today. Thank you so much for taking the time with our DIME community. We're excited for the conversation about the clinical strength of digital health in key ecosystems. We're certainly in a period of change, so this is going to be a very important presentation for everyone on the line. Great opportunity for us to learn. Before we get started, perhaps you could introduce yourself and also tell us a little bit about Galen before we dive in.
Thanks so much, Jen. I appreciate the warm welcome. Yeah, I'm glad I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, so it's nice to be in front of a group of people who really appreciate digital health and know what I'm talking about. I work with Galen Growth, the global digital health specialist. We help hundreds of corporations and thousands of ventures across the world achieve their ambitions in digital health, from strategic market intelligence, product positioning, scouting for specific ventures to solve problem statements, through to corporate venturing, right? With our specialist knowledge, unmatched digital health data, and deep connections in the digital health ecosystem, we empower our clients to change healthcare for the better. And we do that through our both our consulting work and the work we do with our clients, as well as through our digital health platform, our digital health intelligence platform, Health Tech Alpha. Health Tech Alpha is the world's leading digital health private market data, intel, and insights platform. And it's used by industry, investors, startups, right, to understand what's going on in the world of digital health. We have, with over 12,000 digital health ventures globally cataloged, we have more data than any other private market intelligence platforms. We have the best-in-class taxonomy because it's focused on digital health. We are only doing digital health, and therefore you can get much better search results than Google, right? With our unmatched expert team and analysts and our focus on digital health, we really can help you get to the solutions you need quicker. This data also powers our thematic reports, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. We released yesterday a thematic report on clinical strength in digital health. And I'm going to share my screen.
Perfect. So I'll stop sharing, Sarah, and thank you so much for being here and being willing to share some of that data with the DIME community. Looking forward to learning from you today and really getting some data-driven insights.
Thanks, Jen. Sharing my screen. Okay, there we go. Just realized I didn't really introduce myself very well. I'm Sarah Schmachtenberg, the head of data and analytics for Europe and the United States for Galen Growth. I've been working with Galen Growth for about 2 years now, and it's a pleasure to be able to share a lot of the information we have with all of you. So let's jump in, and don't worry about the first slide, right? It is funding, but we're not going to focus on funding here. We just have to use that, right, as our motivation for the rest of the slide, because with the slowdown of funding in 2022, which I'm sure you guys have all heard about, right? The world is stopping and there's no more funding for digital health. Well, that's not true. And if you want to look at our ecosystem reports, those are free to download. But really, there is a slowdown. Digital health is anchoring back to the reality of becoming more focused and demanding that more verification that ventures are offering solutions that'll bring value to the digital health ecosystem, right? It's not just free money for all anymore. You have to be able to show that your solution is working, which makes sense, right? Jen talked just a minute ago about a turning point in digital health, and that's that maturing of the ecosystem, right? You're no longer just throwing a solution out there, you're really verifying and polishing the solutions that are there, right? And in order to really meet the demands of now the market of saying, hey, you're mature, act like an adult, right? These ventures are going to have to really demonstrate the effectiveness of their solutions. So because we're talking about healthcare solutions, let's you know as well as I do what those pieces of evidence are that ventures are going to have to show. First of all, expanding. Well, this spring there was a publication came out by the Journal of JMIR, right? Most of you may have read it, assessing the clinical robustness of digital health, right? It was a great publication and really started this discussion on what can digital health companies show in order to assess, or how can we assess their clinical robustness, the really understanding whether their solutions work. And so we took that, and for us, it's the JMIR report focused on clinical trials and regulatory filings. We add in there and feel strongly that peer-reviewed publications are also very much a verification of the clinical robustness, but also the scientific robustness of a venture. If they're able to have a peer-reviewed publication showing that they have a strict scientific methodology, can come up with a hypothesis, improve that solution, then it gives them a lot of verification, right? And as we look across the globe, we know that indeed 7% of digital health ventures across the globe have applied for clinical trials. That doesn't include any clinical trials that have been stopped. 9% have regulatory filings. That doesn't include FDA registrations, right? Those are just a formal thing. So we're not including those. And then 10% of global digital health ventures have peer-reviewed publications, right, in a peer-reviewed journal. So there is definitely a movement for ventures, for digital health companies to start building this evidence, right, that their solution works and it brings benefits to whether it be to a patient, to an HCP, or to a consumer, as it might be. Right now, the advantage that we have at Galen Growth, right, is we have the largest database of private digital health ventures, right? We catalog for every venture. We catalog their clinical trials, we catalog their regulatory filings, and we catalog their peer-reviewed publications. So we know, looking across the globe, and we're talking about 5 major ecosystems from Asia Pacific to the Middle East, including Israel, Europe, North America, and South America, that the evidence, right, for clinical strength is growing exponentially, right? You have a 5-year CAGR of about 40%, which is 4 times the CAGR of the number of new ventures coming into the market, right? So there really is an explosion of ventures who can show that they have evidence their solution works, right? And that's an explosion that we're seeing right now, and it's really for those of us in the area, it's heartening to see, because we've had to deal with critics and with doubters, right, for many years, saying digital health doesn't really work, and now we can say yes, it definitely does work. More than half of that evidence that we're talking about is being generated by ventures in North America, a quarter of it by ventures in Europe, 16% in Asia Pacific, 6% in the Middle East. And South America is definitely a growing market, but it's still very nascent for digital health. But they have a lot of strong ventures coming out of South America, so it's really exciting to see what's happening there. But they're just kind of at the beginning, right, of their journey. So So what we did at Galen Growth, we do within our platform, we have signals, right? We do analytics, taking all the data we have in order to give an indication, right, of a venture and that particular venture's strengths and weaknesses. So we developed what we called the evidence signal for digital health ventures, and that's exactly what we've been talking about. It's giving a signal, giving a rating to a venture to say how much evidence has it been able to generate to strengthen, right, to support its claims that its products are bringing benefits. So this is how, for the rest of the report, we're going to be looking at this at the scale that you see of the evidence signal, starting from 0 to 20, saying ventures don't have any peer-reviewed publications, they don't have any clinical trials, and no regulatory approvals. And then once those ventures start to get an approval, once they start to get a clinical trial under the belt, then we consider them to have established clinical strength. Right. Once they've gone over that threshold of what we say is 40, then they have established themselves, established their product with having evidence. After that is just icing on the cake. You know, as you get to ventures with multiple regulatory filings or many clinical trials, then you assume they're expanding their portfolio, or they have multiple claims that have to be proven. Right. So that's what we're calling our evidence signal. And you'll see this whole report focuses on ventures that have greater than 40 for their evidence signal, which means they either have an approved clinical trial, a regulatory filing, or at least 4 peer-reviewed publications. So there's significant weight going in there. Now, it is very clear to us at Galen Growth that not all ventures are going to require some sort of clinical evidence, right? And it's not expected that all ventures reach that evidence signal of greater than 40. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into the different types of products, and then it's very clear to see which ones do require it and which ones don't. So we'll get into that when we look through the different segmentation types. Okay, I hope you're following me so far. Now it kind of gets fun, because now we can start looking at the ventures, right, and understand what are the characteristics, you know, which ventures have gotten how far as of today, more or less. All right, so looking back at all the evidence that digital health ventures have collected, right? I've plotted here a histogram of ventures and their age at which they cross that threshold of evidence signal greater than 40, right? At which they say, okay, yes, now they have some clinical strength. And I've plotted here the histogram of the age at which those ventures did that. You know, how many years after incorporation were they able to establish that clinical strength? And what you see is there are definitely companies that incorporate already having clinical strength, right? And then that makes sense. Those are spin-offs from university, right? Or spin-off from another company. They have a particular technology, they have a product already, and they spun off to develop a new company, right? To bring that product into market. Right, so that's that 0, right? That's when they're incorporated, then they already have clinical evidence, but that's not many. That's 6% of ventures globally. So going further along this curve, think about if you are a corporation and you're looking to partner, right, with a venture, or you're an investor and you're looking to make an investment, you want to know, right, what's our expectation, right? And what you can see is 50% of ventures, right, have this clinical strength, have established clinical strength by the age of 4 years after incorporation. For me, that seems pretty quick, but going further up the scale, 80% of the ventures. So you should have expectations that 7 years after incorporation, those ventures do have some sort of established clinical strength, right? After that, the numbers go down. You can think of 100 reasons as to why they might have to wait longer. But that's the expectation. Then if you're partnering with a venture, or if you're an investor, you should be able to have that expectation that at 7 years after incorporation, a venture should have some sort of evidence. Right, and as I said, we can look at the whole globe, right? The JMIR paper, they looked at 250 ventures because they were kind of doing that by hand. Since for us, it's a click of a button, more or less, we've looked at 12,000 ventures across the globe. And what's the heat map has a lot of numbers on it, but what's I find very interesting is looking down here in the bottom left-hand corner. And that's this 66%, right? 66% of ventures have not established any sort of clinical evidence by the age of, 12 years old or more, right? So that's likely the percentage of ventures that might not ever establish clinical strength and perhaps don't need it, right? Those are the ventures. So that's when you look at the whole world of digital health, you can say, okay, yeah, about 60% really don't even need it. So we shouldn't expect that from all ventures. Of course, you have to understand which area you're in and whether or not an expectation should be there or not. Otherwise, looking up to the very high clinical, the very high evidence signals, excuse me, where you can see how it definitely takes time after incorporation to generate that much evidence. So that's then a picture of globally, where the age of ventures. So now let's dig a little bit deeper and segment kind of by geography and understand what's going on, other than just years after incorporation for ventures. So looking across the globe, it's may or may not be surprising to you that North America doesn't have the highest percentage of ventures with established clinical strength, right? These percentages are of all the ventures in North America, 18% of the ventures have established clinical strength, right? You go not much higher, so it's about the same as in Europe. Europe has 19% of ventures. On the top here is the Middle East, especially in Israel. There's a concentration of ventures that they focus on those areas of digital health that do require higher clinical strength. Whereas Asia Pacific, that number goes down significantly, and in South America you have only 3% of ventures having established clinical strength. If you look at the maturity, I think I do have on the screen, you see the venture maturity in South America is significantly lower than the other areas of the world. So that has a lot to do with the low clinical strength, right? So that's your global picture. You can see each area of the world. It's bigger on my top screen, so that's why I keep on looking up. Actually, the North America does have the most ventures with high clinical strength, followed by Asia Pacific and Europe. But that's due to the fact that the North American ecosystem is, I got that. That's the total ecosystem. Excuse me, I got that messed up. The total ecosystem, and then North America followed by Europe have the most ventures with established clinical strength. Now, I didn't mention what is that venture maturity. Venture maturity is another signal that we use within our platform, Health Tech Alpha, to show just what it says, right? The maturity of a venture, at what stage is it, right, in bringing products to market, or expanding product portfolio, or in the very late stages of maturity where it's looking to perhaps acquire other ventures or bring a very platform type of solution to its clients. Right. So that's all in Health Tech Alpha. Now we can look actually within the different regions if you want to see that, yes, the United States has the most ventures. It's also a very large ecosystem, but the United States has actually, what you see, 19% of the ventures have established clinical strength, whereas if you go to the United Kingdom, it's a much smaller ecosystem, but almost 30% of the ventures have established clinical strength. And going down, for example, to South Korea, even 31% of ventures have that established clinical strength. Right. So very telling as what a particular ecosystem puts its focus on, and the type of digital health ventures that are in that particular ecosystem. Looking at that volume of ventures, I think this is what we just talked about, highlighted in the last slide, is that 39% of the ventures are sitting in North America, followed by Europe, right? Asia Pacific is actually quite far behind Europe as far as the volume of ventures with established clinical strength. Also has to do with the fact that there are countries that don't require any sort of registration or any too much. The regulation there is much lower than perhaps in other parts of the globe. So again, going back to the do the ventures that require the clinical strength, and what kind of clinical strength or what kind of evidence would be expected of that venture. So we consider the ventures to have established clinical strength, to have been able to prove that their solution works, right? And one advantage that brings to the venture is that it makes them more attractive for investment or for partnerships. Excuse me. We track partnerships of each venture. And if we look at only the subset of ventures that do have this established clinical strength, 20% of those ventures are partnering with healthcare providers, right? So typically when we look at the digital health world, and like I said, if you look at any of our ecosystem reports on galengrowth.com, you will see that typically the pharma biotech companies take up the greatest proportion of partnerships. But here, in fact, you do have those health systems coming in. A lot of it is because they're partnering to do research, right, to produce those publications or to do the clinical trials. So that makes a little bit of sense. But you do have the pharma biotech with 15% of the partnerships, followed by academia and institutions, and finally by insurance providers. Right, so that's who's really targeting the top clinical strength ventures, right? With 41% of the ventures who are partnering located in the US, right? Asia Pacific actually commands 30%. So that means that the ventures that do have clinical strength within Asia Pacific are much more active in partnering and much more active in getting their solution into the market. So they're very strong. It's a smaller proportion, but it's a very strong category of ventures that are sitting within Asia Pacific, right? Finally, looking at partnerships by cluster, and I'm going to I'll introduce clusters in just a minute. Clusters are the way that we break up the descriptions of products within the digital health space. And I'm remembering now I don't have that slide in, but we look at everything from, you see 5 out of 18 clusters here. Health management solutions, which are like the IT backbones, including predictive analytics, right, for the healthcare systems. In order to implement digital health, they need this IT backbone. Research solutions are what's typically used by pharma biotech companies in order to do the research. Drug discovery, bioinformatics, clinical trials has been split out from research solutions recently because it's such a growing area with decentralized clinical trials, clinical trial matching. Patient solutions is focusing on what a patient, the digital solutions that a patient uses, typically after they've been diagnosed. So disease management tools, digital therapeutics, right? Medication management tools, those types of solutions. And finally, medical diagnostics are, the name says it all, it's a diagnostic tool, right, in digital health. So these are 5 of the 18 clusters that we consider to be digital health. And these are the clusters that have the highest percentage of ventures with established clinical strength. So within research solutions ventures that are partnering, that have partnerships, right, 74% of those do have a high clinical strength or an evidence signal greater than 40. So, okay, I feel like I'm talking a lot. So we'll give your brain just a little bit of a break. Something that is easy to understand. We've been talking about partnerships in clinical strength. So there aren't any graphs here, just a little table showing who's the most active partners, or the most active entities that are partnering with established clinical strength ventures. What you see is, we talked before that the healthcare systems are very strong in the area. That's true, but those are distributed health systems across the globe, right? 4 out of the 5 here are in fact pharma companies. So those focused pharma companies do have take the top spot as the most active partners, right? Novartis, for example, having 48 partnerships. Okay, and just for the fun of it, jumping into Novartis, because they take the top spot. We can look at they have quite a strong portfolio, because 48 of the 107 total partnerships in their portfolio, right, are with ventures having established clinical strength. So the team who's choosing the partnerships within Novartis must put an emphasis on making sure those ventures do have proven solutions in the market. They have an average alpha score, average maturity score, right, of 65.2, which is very much above the average for ventures. So they choose ventures with established clinical strength and with proven maturity, right? And I showed you before those top 5 clusters, right, that have ventures with evidence, and 60% of the portfolios in those are in those top 5 clusters, right? So we're looking 67% of the ventures should have established clinical strength. 45 do, so there is a bit of a gap between the 67 and 45, but overall, it's a pretty impressive portfolio as far as clinical strength goes, along with some of the names that you guys might recognize across the globe. Okay, so let's jump into the next topic. If you guys are still with me, I don't see any questions yet. Jen, we're still okay. Then let's keep going. We still have a little bit of time. Cluster and therapeutic focus. We've been talking about clusters, so fortunately the slides are set up that way, so we can continue with that. Looking at digital health clusters. And this is where we said we have clusters such as online health communities, right? You have clusters such as, let's see, online marketplaces that most likely don't require any sort of clinical strength, right? And that's the way the products look, right? Some products in digital health don't require clinical strength. These are the top ones that likely do require clinical evidence. So that is looking on the top is medical diagnostics, right? Any sort of diagnostic solution, you are most likely the venture is most likely going to have to get some sort of approval from a regulatory body and have clinical data, right, from clinical trials to show that it works. So medical diagnostic remote devices are the same. So you expect very much those to be on top. And with 38% of the ventures, 35% of the ventures in those clusters having established clinical strength, right? That is, they sit on the top, right? A third of the ventures do indeed have established clinical strength. The rest of them are either too young or perhaps are in a niche area that doesn't require it. That's followed, of course, by patient solutions, clinical trials, research solutions you can read yourselves. What you do see though, wellness solutions. Within wellness sits health trackers, right? Your Fitbit watches, your Oura rings, and those types of things. So there are definitely solutions in fitness trackers or in wellness and health trackers that do require clinical evidence. And as well, those health trackers are oftentimes used in studies or used in not necessarily clinical studies, but studies that are published in peer-reviewed publications, right? So those areas can as well establish clinical strength, although at first glance, it doesn't seem like they should need it because it's only a wellness solution. We will look at only wellness solutions when we look at preventive health in the next area in therapeutic areas, but across the globe, you pretty much see all of the global regions. I'm not showing South America because it doesn't have enough data to really be relevant at this point. But medical diagnostics definitely shows up in all 4 global regions. The only one that's a little bit different here, Europe has patient solutions as the number 2 place instead of remote devices. So within each cluster, of course, you have ventures focusing on different therapeutic areas, right? And again, this is all data that that Galen, it's daily work for Galen Growth, right? We, within our database, our venture database, we tag each venture with whatever is the appropriate cluster, and that's even broken down into categories, and then as well with any therapeutic areas that they're focusing on. And there are certainly solutions that are disease agnostic. I haven't included those here in the presentation because those tend to have a much lower percentage of ventures with clinical strength. But what we see is looking at through the different therapeutic areas. If you have a venture focused on a very specific therapeutic area, then that tends to have a higher clinical percentage of ventures with clinical strength. In particular, respiratory diseases takes the #1 spot with 45% of all ventures globally that have a solution in respiratory diseases also have established clinical strength. So that's quite a high number, and that takes the #1 spot. Cardiovascular, gastroenterology, infectious diseases, right? These are all the top therapeutic areas as far as clinical strength goes, right? Now on the right, bit of an infographic, but what we've looked at is those therapeutic areas and the venture volume, right? The areas that have the highest number of ventures across the globe. And the top spot here is mental health, right? There are more mental health ventures than any other therapeutic area across the globe. And of those mental health, 16% of them have established clinical strength. So that's much, much lower than what you see in, for example, respiratory diseases. Now, as Dime, you probably have the same impression I do. That's probably much too low for a venture. Excuse me, just a second. Mental health, that number should be much higher, right? As a therapeutic area than digital health, there should be evidence showing also for mental health solutions. Oncology is 37%. That matches what I've shown before, and preventive health is the #3 largest therapeutic area or focus area within digital health, and there are only 14% of ventures do have established clinical strength, right? So while we do see big numbers for therapeutic areas, there are also some areas that certainly do need some focus in this particular area. Hopefully you agree on that because of the medical necessity for mental health and preventive health. Okay, with a little bit of time, let's go into investment insights. And again, I promised I wouldn't bore you with numbers as far as funding, but there is a very much an important point that I want to show is that we looked at the number of years after incorporation, right? That a venture establishes their clinical strength, and we very much see that as well across the different funding stages that a venture goes through, right? It's staying in the seed stage. The early stage has the seed, the grant stage, right? And there, only 15% of ventures have established clinical strength, right? That's the stage where they're still building their solution, right? And understanding, is it work? Will it work, right? Is anyone interested? What's going on? Series A then is getting that solution onto market. And then you have a much higher percentage of ventures establishing clinical strength. And it does, with each funding stage, you go up. You see there's definitely an increase in ventures with established clinical strength. And it's really, this is going back to the point where as the funding, as venture capital becomes more cautious, right? Ventures that can show evidence that the solution benefits the intended user will be more attractive for future investment and for future partnerships. All right, the share of deal volume, if you're sitting in the Middle East, a third of all deals, all funding deals, went to ventures with established clinical strength. Right, so it's a very important piece of digital health, and we definitely at Galen Growth see it becoming more important in the future, as the focus starts to get to venture maturity, right, and really looking at how the digital health ecosystem is going to grow. I'll jump in. I have a few more slides here, unless Jen, I think I'm looking at the time. Where?
Sorry, it took me a second to come back on video. Don't worry, you're not talking to yourself. No, please keep going. I've got a age of chicken scratch and questions here, but finish the presentation and then let's dive into conversation with our guests.
Okay, well, I just wanted to highlight one. There's more information in our full report. And this one, it's not a free report, so it is one that you'd have to purchase. There's an executive summary with kind of the first few slides that I showed available for you to download from our website. But one just quickly deep dive into North America to kind of demonstrate, right, what else we can do, and when we look deeper into a particular ecosystem, right? So understanding the North American ecosystem, which is mainly the United States, but also within Canada, there are many ventures that have established clinical strength, right? Being able to look at, yes, 18%, only 18% have that established clinical strength, but 5% are that 20 to 40 scale range. So they are working on getting there, right? But that growth of ventures achieving the evidence signal, right, by year. So every year, the number of ventures that are crossing that threshold is going up, right? And that's with the global trends. The only area we don't see that in is Asia Pacific. Asia Pacific has had a rough last year and a half in digital health, and this year we also see Asia Pacific suffering and not growing as much as we would like it to. So, but North America and Europe, for sure, you see every year more ventures. Achieving that established clinical strength has a lot to do with venture maturity. So it's very promising. And when I talked about the funding stages, more than 50%, more than half of the ventures that go public by IPO or SPAC have established clinical strength, right? So again, in order to really reach those milestones, this is something that ventures are just being forced to do. And I think the healthcare providers and everyone is very appreciative that we are being able to see that established proof of solution within digital health. It's no longer just an app for the fun of it, right? It is definitely something that is gaining evidence and is very much the future of our healthcare systems. Okay, so with that, I'll stop. I didn't have too much more to go, Jen. And like I said, GalenGrowth.com is the company, HealthTechAlpha.com is our platform. You can sign up for a free account to explore the type of information that's on ventures there. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have now, or you can contact Galen Growth later if you have further questions. And with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Jen, and see what questions we have right now.
Fantastic. Sarah, this was an incredible overview of insights from the venture sector in digital. Appreciate you walking us through that, and it's exciting. And again, I appreciate you making sort of knowledge of this resource available to our DIME community. So thank you first and foremost. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm watching the chat and also looking for raised hands. But in the meantime, I'm going to exercise my moderator's here to be able to ask a few questions of my own. My first question, I mean, I want to dive into it in much more detail as the discussion goes on. My first question is, do you have a sense of whether this data, so the evidence-based data and the partnerships data, incredibly powerful, leading or lagging indicator? Do you have a sense of that yet, or are we still too early in our knowledge of how this all plays out over time?
Right. Well, the evidence signal, I think, is definitely leading, right?
Mhm.
That oftentimes comes first, or you have a solution, you have to prove it before you bring it onto market, right? So that's really a leading signal as to what's going to happen. The partnerships tends to be more of a lagging solution, because many of the partnerships you don't find out about until they have their first proof points. So it's a good question, and it's very much so that the evidence that a venture generates is really a good indication that there's strength there and has good potential for the future.
Fantastic. And with that, Pip, I'm going to go ahead and see. Oh, I can't do it. I don't think I'm the host. Katie, can we see if we can unmute Pip or promote her to panelist so she can ask her question live to Sarah? Because I think it builds really nicely on what you were just saying about evidence definitely being that that leading indicator. See if we can pull this off.
Testing.
We've got you here.
Great.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So on one of the earlier slides, you showed that 12 years since like inception, there were like, I think it was 66% of companies who just didn't have any evidence. It's probably because, you know, they just don't need it. What kinds of companies or devices are these ones? Because I guess I'm based very much in a, oh, you're doing this, you need evidence. So it's quite surprising. I guess there are these out there, and it'd be good to know what the distinction is.
It's a very good question, and I'm trying to depends on your definition of digital health, and we find at Galen Growth there are a lot of people with a lot of different definitions of digital health. So our definition of digital health includes things like teleconsultation, right? If you have an app that helps facilitate teleconsultation, you're not going to need evidence that particular communication app is bringing benefits, right? Of course, what you do with that app is of course important, but the communication isn't within itself isn't going to require evidence. Other things like I talked about, we have HCP education, online education, right? Consumer education, health information platforms, right? That Wikipedia of healthcare type of thing, which as well, you're not going to have evidence. So those are the types of solutions that are within our definition of digital health, but we don't expect them to in fact have any sort of evidence of product type thing.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for that. That was great. I think thinking about that, I noticed you pulled out the different types of evidence, and 10% was sort of academic publications. And I imagine for those kind of like sort of telehealth and encyclopedia of health things, yeah, you're right. They don't go ahead and they make their own evidence. But I imagine sometimes they're used as kind of like interventions in behavioral studies. A group don't get access to telehealth, a group do get access to telehealth. So are those pulled into your system where they exist, or are they sort of attributed to something else?
They actually, we do pull them into the system. As far as they're referenced within the paper or mentioned in the paper. As you talked about, they are very they can be very important tools, especially like, for example, the clinical trial tools, remote data capture, that type of thing. And those are typically referenced by name in the publication, and then we do pull them in and credit then that particular venture with a piece of evidence, because it's very much verification that their solution is valuable.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, because I find that very interesting, because recently I've been working on a trial where we have gone down that telehealth route for doing diagnostic interviews or clinical interviews, and getting that evidence for it seems actually more and more valuable now. So it seems that maybe these people started thinking they don't need the evidence, and now it's like, wow, if that evidence existed, that would be great. And now we're having to do it all 12 years later because it's necessary.
Right. Well, I mean, if you knew that provider had been in 5 other trials, right, you have a lot more confidence in them to partner with them. So that's exactly the purpose of that evidence signal. That's
great. Well, thanks for those comments. It's wonderful.
Thanks for your question.
Fantastic. Thanks, Pip. And Pip and Sarah, I think you're getting to the heart of the matter that we experience in some of our work here at Dime. So for example, we have a fantastic initiative that we host with colleagues at the American Telemedicine Association, Impact, focused on virtual first care. So there's an awful lot of excellent virtual first care providers who are meeting critical unmet need for patients and developing very sort of holistic care using a variety of different sort of clinical contacts, plus digital tools in the toolbox. What's really interesting is they're constantly asked for evidence, but in some cases, the way that a physician practices care in the clinic doesn't demand that kind of evidence. And sometimes, if we're providing virtual care, it's as safe and secure as the care in your doctor's office, because it is your doctor's office in the digital era. And so it's thinking about what's the fit for purpose match of evidence to, Sarah, as you said, that digital solution. Though I'm with you, and I'd love you to comment on it a little bit more. The lack of evidence supporting the mental health solution stood out at me too. Obviously, mental health is an area of enormous unmet need. Mental health needs aren't 9 till 5 Monday to Friday. So you can think about digital as being a powerful solution because it can be 24/7. What do you think is driving that paucity of evidence?
I think you hit the nail on the head, is that mental health isn't just making somebody feel good. There should be evidence that it's working. And there are a lot of solutions that have come out with corporate health, right? Or different apps that there were so much in the pandemic, right? There was an explosion in digital health. We followed it quite closely. Oncology was always the top funded region or therapeutic area, and then all of a sudden, the pandemic came and it was digital health, or it was mental health, and all these ventures came up. And it was, a lot of them are very immature, right? So they haven't reached that maturity that other ventures in other areas have. And we expect a lot of them will die off, right, in the next couple of years as well. Because A, they're not getting the funding anymore. And B, they just, a lot of them were app developers, right? Or were software developers that decided, hey, let's jump in on this bandwagon. And now it's not a way to develop a digital health solution. Right. And so that's where you're going to weed out, and we'll see that attrition in the next couple of years of those ventures kind of dying off. And then hopefully that number will increase again to understand, what really, or to really put the focus again on the ventures that do have the clinical strength.
That's fascinating, actually, to think about that particular therapeutic area being critically important, but more immature. And I think to your point, we really are going to see a moment, just because of, tightening around funding, where it's going to, the cream is going to rise. Those solutions that can actually point to evidence that they are safe and effective, that they are making a difference for patients, for their partners, right? Whether that be a healthcare system. And it was interesting, right? It was interesting to hear that healthcare systems are forging ahead. Obviously, the largest individual partners are pharma because they're multinational, but that healthcare systems are eclipsing pharma. Was that a trend you saw before the pandemic, or was that something that you saw our healthcare delivery colleagues surpass pharma in terms of partnering with digital solutions during the pandemic?
We honestly don't see it in too many other areas. Right.
When we interesting.
Look at, we've done reports on remote patient monitoring, on women's health, on oncology in different areas, and that's not typically a trend that we see. So really coming here into the ventures with the higher clinical strength, right? That's where we see the healthcare systems coming up to the top, which, like I said, is partially attributable to the fact that through the partnership, the venture can develop the evidence a bit easier, but also attributable to the fact that the healthcare system needs that evidence, probably, in order to bring the solution to its patients. It can't take an immature solution. It's not an option.
It's interesting too, isn't it, given that the entire data set is venture funded digital health organizations, and there's a tension, right, between the rate of return that venture investors expect and the time it takes to generate evidence. And what we're starting to see, right, we said that evidence is a leading indicator, perhaps pushing, especially in a tighter funding era where you might be a little bit more discerning with your investments, the imperative for more patient investing to actually support the generation of evidence. Because once you get to that moment where there's sufficient evidence that you can secure a partnership, it then starts to grow exponentially, right?
Right. And yeah, absolutely right. You need those partnerships in order to get because a lot of times, especially with the big pharma companies, the partnerships generate funding for the companies or help them pay for those clinical trials and that type of thing. And within the medical space, right, it's expensive to run a clinical trial. It's just really, it takes a lot and it takes time to get there. So you're absolutely right. There is going to come in the near future a time where you have to see, okay, who's really going to fund that? And we do as well. You saw the NHS there in the top partners, right? You do see governments pushing the solutions as well and trying to be very active in making sure these solutions get to market.
Fantastic. Sarah, as we start to approach the top of the hour, I'm going to ask you sort of two questions to help really harness your expertise. You sit in this data all day. Give all of us, everyone on the line today in the DIME community more broadly, I mean, what should we make of this data? We define at DIME digital medicine as an evidence-based field. Do we double down on that? What do we make of the data and the trends that you've presented today?
Well, I mean, I think we see the evidence is growing, almost exponentially. So we can expect the area to continue to grow and more evidence continue to be generated. Another trend that should definitely be on your radar is the platform generation, right? When you back a little bit into funding again, but you have to do it. You see this year, we've seen a ton, and the year before, a ton of M&A activity of more mature ventures gobbling up the smaller ventures, right? And that's only going to help the less mature ventures generate that evidence, right? The bigger companies, the Teladoc and all these, they have the capacity to run the clinical trial. They have the capacity to generate the evidence, and they're going to take then, like you said, the cream of the crop of the more creative, less mature solutions, acquire those, and then create their own platform, right? With multiple solutions, being able to give those end-to-end patient solutions that we need in digital health, right? And generate the evidence with it, right? So that's really where this is going, and that's what we see is going to really be the future of the evidence generation. Maybe ventures can do it on their own. That's great, but if not, the partnering and the acquisition as a route to getting those solutions to market.
It's interesting, actually, that those two, I hadn't thought about a move towards consolidation and the opportunity that creates for more meaningful evidence generation as going hand in hand, but actually that makes an awful lot of sense. I also like, Sarah, what you pointed out around how now some of these, what would have individually a couple of years ago, right, before we started to mature as we are, would have been a sort of patchwork of individual point solutions, which while those individual solutions may be great, right, that's not valuable to either an individual patient or to sort of provider practices. We can't have a messy patchwork of different phones and apps and widgets and platforms and logins. Exactly. So it's also interesting to think about that, how that sort of consolidation is also thinking about a more integrated and complete digital solution for patients and for the people who care for them.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of data generation going on, and once you generate that platform, you can consolidate the data, right, of evidence, and not obviously that's not a clinical trial, but that's public worth of a peer-reviewed publication saying, hey, there's this data that shows these trends, right, and you can publish that in order to generate a lot of evidence to get support.
Absolutely. And then Sarah, you shared details of how all of us can access some of the data assets that you have at Galen. What would you, we can go in there, we can poke around. You shared those details. We're going to share your slides. how would you encourage to think about using this incredible resource that you've made available to us?
Oh, use it as much as you can. Share it. It depends. It's definitely an individual, and depending on your individual need, right? We have clients that are investors who use it to search for the next investee or to understand the trends. Right, Health Tech Alpha can be used. We have tools to understand trends in the market, in not only looking at 12,000 ventures, but you can shrink those 12,000 down into the areas that's interesting to you, whether it be omics ventures or anything like that, and to understand the trends there, or to find competitors. You're understanding what particular health systems, who they're partnering with, right? Or you can look at a particular venture, right, and understand who the competitors are. So there are many ways to use the platform, depending on what your needs are. Early stage ventures, or ventures themselves, can go adopt their own profiles, right, and make sure they're complete. Seed stage ventures can even have access for free to the platform. The whole platform. Anyone can go create a basic account, but those smaller ventures can actually access in order to find investors, right, to understand what the competitors are doing. It's a very valuable platform for understanding the ecosystem and knowing what's going on in digital health.
Fantastic. Sarah, I was inspired today by the detailed reporting of evidence. It's always a question I have, and I think it really is a leading indicator for the health and longevity of our field. And I have such high hopes, not for digital swanning in and fixing all of the challenges we have in health and healthcare, but as a powerful set of tools. So it's exciting to see that promise being borne out in the data, and appreciate you taking us through such a fantastic overview of the different ways that we can evaluate progress and maturity in our field. So Sarah, thank you so much. Thank you to the team at Galen. And as we said, folks on the line, we will make sure that the slides and recording get posted on the Dime webinar page in the next day or two. Sarah, thank you for your time today. And folks on the line, if you would like to join us for our next event, we have our virtual journal club tomorrow, if you haven't had enough Dime for this week. And we're delighted to be welcoming our colleagues, two representatives from Pfizer, who are going to be talking about how they've used a very specific Python package that's open access to streamline wearable data from inertial sensors. So Sarah, thank you again. Folks on the line, thank you for spending an hour with us. I think you'll agree it was incredibly valuable, and look forward to welcoming you to Journal Club tomorrow if you have time. Sarah, thanks so much.
Thanks, Jen, it was fun.